Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to see you. What a fantastic springtime day we've had today. And we've had a brilliant springtime days for the last few days. So it's an absolute pleasure to share some of Richard Moore's bird photographs. He lives in Tor Cross. He takes lots of amazing images of birds on our patch. So what really springs all about in the bird world is migration and bird song, and that's what I'm intending to speak about this evening, really. Birds have come from very far away places where they've spent the winter to come and spend the summer with us. It's a really busy time of the year, and it's the breeding season that's really driving all this. So I'll be saying quite a bit more about that. So the last slide was 150 species, because I believe there's probably about 150 different sorts of birds in the AONB tonight. And these include some of our winter visitors that haven't flown north yet, and quite a few of our summer visitors that have only just arrived and are about to arrive. So about 150 species in the AONB, and that's quite a lot to think about. So I'll start with the largest British bird, the mute swans. They're not exactly migrants. They're quite short-term migrants. They don't fly very, very far. They spend a lot of time in small groups and flocks, herds of mute swans, in fact. And at this time of year, they've already paired up. They've already started to build their nests. And there we are, the largest British bird. Weighs about... they're heavy. They're really heavy birds, and when they take off from the water, they have to paddle really hard to actually get some lift to leave the surface. So, of the 150, that's the largest. This is the smallest, the Gold Crest. Weighs about the same as a 20p piece. Once again, it's another one of those 150 species that we can see at the moment in the AONB. They're starting to breed. I hear them singing quite a lot just at the moment. And so between the largest and the smallest, we've got this amazing array of birds on our patch. So actually here is our patch. It's, as Nikki says, it's our 60th birthday. So the pale green area was designated in 1960 as an area of outstanding natural beauty. And it covers 340 square kilometres of land, 75 kilometres of coastline. We've got 5 beautiful estuaries along this South Devon heritage coast. It's looked after pretty well by the various landowners and the authorities involved. We've got 6 special areas of conservation, SACs. We've got 18 SSSIs, sites of special scientific interest, 2 national nature reserves. So in terms of the habitats, they're well managed, not just for birds, but for all living things. And in terms of a time depth, a deep history, we've got 58 scheduled monuments, and we've got 4 protected wreck sites just offshore. So what a special place it is as well. So perhaps say a little bit more about the main sites to go bird watching, but the best thing to do is really have a look at our website. There's just so much information there, there really, really is. So I talked about those important habitats that we have, and that the landscape across the AONB is defined by 10 special qualities, and you'll see that we've got a very, very diverse landscape. But really, it's about getting to know your habitats. If you want to see lots of birds, get to read the landscape, get to understand the habitats, and you should be able to see a lot of those birds. A good day out, you might see as many as between 60 and 80 species if you know what you're looking for. and you have a good day's rummaging around those habitats. So the oak and wet woodlands is really quite special to us with our rear oaks along the edges of the estuaries. We've got some flower-rich meadows and pastures, and some of that's on limestone. So limestone grassland, particularly good for wildflowers. The maritime grassland and heathland, there's not a huge amount of heathland, but there are little bits of it. Really special as are those maritime cliffs with their slopes and their caves. Of course, there's a lot of agricultural land across our patch, and the cereal field margins are not only great for wildflowers, but they're great for ground nesting birds. Our freshwater lagoons and marshes and reed beds are spectacular. They really, really are. And that's a really quite a specialised habitat for a lot of different sorts of birds. Those 5 estuaries, there's quite a lot of sheltered estuarine water, and at different times of the year, birds use those to feed or to nest. And you choose your estuaries right, you're going to see some great birds. Then we got those coastal habitats with rocky foreshores and the eelgrass beds. They're really important for generating food for birds. We haven't got much sand dune, but I've got a bit. We've got some shingle, salt marsh and mudflats, all great for the waders. So just being able to read the landscape and see those habitats, you will find different sorts of birds. And that's one of the tricks of it for me. So you're going to wonder what's going on with this slide. I've talked a lot about birds migrating, and birds have been migrating for millennia. And long ago, people didn't really understand where birds were going or what they were doing. And the mysteries of migration are still actually being uncovered now. So the ancient Greeks thought that swallows turned into fishes. That slide sort of says it all for me. I can imagine when all the swallows disappear, you wonder where they go. They might actually turn into fishes. And you know that there have been records that swallows can be found caught up in fishermen's nets, and that also aided to the proof that that's what swallows did. Even in the sort of in the 19th century, the well-known naturalist Gilbert White from Dorset, he thought swallows hibernated in mud. That makes quite a lot of sense as well, because hundreds and thousands of swallows will roost in reed beds, and then they'll go quiet at night, and then before you know it, they all disappear. It might add up to the fact that that's what they did, hibernate in mud. So Slapton itself, it's a great place for birding, and just at the moment we've got some really interesting birds at Slapton, but I'll mention a little bit more about those. It's a site of special scientific interest. It's 1.5 miles long. It's a national nature reserve, and it's surrounded by a whole range of habitats, which means it's particularly good for birding. The lake's surrounded by some great reed beds and marshy areas, and there's some good woodland habitats as well as the big open water itself. So just at the moment, the swallows are starting to arrive, not in huge numbers yet, but there's a lot of swallows they've gone straight over the top of us with this lovely weather. Even though it's been a bit colder up north, we've still had a lot of swallows through. They're just fabulous birds. I love them, and the secrets of their amazing navigational skills still aren't really understood. It's a combination of different types of senses that helps them navigate. They sort of have an internal compass, and they use the compass of the sun and the stars and sensing the Earth's magnetic field. They also get information from the position of the setting sun and from landmarks that they see as they're flying during the day. Swallows are day migrants. They don't migrate at night, so it's very likely that a big combination of those sorts of things actually help not just swallows but other birds migrate. I think there's some quite recent evidence that the sense of smell can actually play a role. Well, at least for homing pigeons, because that's what they've tested it on. But that's quite an interesting thought that, I'm sure many of you that have perhaps been on holiday abroad, as soon as you land and you leave the aircraft, you'll smell that you're in a different place altogether. They might even be able to do the same. Well, you know, this is one of the reasons that they come, isn't it? They travel these thousands of miles annually, year after year, with very little deviation. The first year that a bird makes its own migration, it does it on its own. So these young swallows here, without any training, it's inside their heads. They're hardwired to migrate, and they hatch, they get fed, and then they sort of orientate themselves here for a while before setting off on these huge journeys. I'm going to focus on the swallow just for a bit because I think it's a good bird to focus on. So the questions that come to my mind are, why do they do it, and when do they do it? So essentially, these birds are migrating from areas of low or decreasing resources to areas of high or increased resources. Pretty simple stuff. It's just looking for their primary needs, which are essentially food and somewhere to nest. And so that's what it's all about, really. Some birds mate for life. Some birds reassess their partners and find a new partner when they arrive. You can tell the difference between a male and a female swallow, apart from it being quite obvious in this slide. The male swallow's got really long tail streamers, and that's what they're doing at the moment. They're twittering and gathering, and they're starting to make their mud and straw nests. So essentially, most birds that nest in the northern hemisphere tend to migrate northward in the spring, and really they're taking advantage of increased insect populations. Some birds are here because all the plants are budding and there's another food source there. There's lots of nesting locations, but it's also to do with day length. So, you know, short distance migrants probably developed from a fairly simple search for food. The origins of long distance migration patterns are much more complex. They've evolved over thousands of years, and they're controlled at least partly by genetics, but just essentially just the makeup of the birds themselves. I've been interested in bird migration all my life, and you know, I was studying birds when I was a young lad. I did this graph in 1974. I was 13 years old, and I started to compare the arrival dates of our summer migrant birds. So this little graph shows the difference between the arrival dates between 1974 and 75. I used to bolt out of the school gate just to go bird watching. You know, I was an obsessed youngster when it came to bird watching, and all of those different dates actually that essentially shows that 1974 was an earlier spring than 75. Things are constantly changing. I'd say it's quite a it's been quite an early spring so far. For us down here in the south. The really harsh weather up north has actually held the birds up, so some birds have actually stayed a little longer than we'd expect. So this is a wood warbler. It's one of my favourite birds, but you know, why would a wood warbler travel here all the way from Africa? It seems strange that it would leave that those warm climes with lots and lots of insects to come north. Why would it make that arduous journey? Well, one idea is that generations of African birds started to disperse from their breeding sites northward. This was thousands, possibly millions of years ago. And the seasonal abundance of insect food, greater day length, allowed them to raise more young. So a wood warbler would, you know, possibly raise between 4 and 6 youngsters on average, whereas their stay-at-home tropical relatives only raise 2 or 3 young, possibly based on day length or the availability of food. So generally, these birds, the summer visitors, their breeding zones have moved north during periods of glacial retreat. So but they still have it in them to return to their tropical homes as the winter weather arrives, and the declining food supplies make life just that bit more difficult. So going back to the swallows again, this is the sort of view that a swallow has of Torcross, the sort of southern end of Slapton Lee. They migrate at about 1,000 foot during the day. So on landfall, they would see this and they'd swoop down and start feeding over the water. They might have flown quite a long way actually, just in a single day. So that's the sort of view that a swallow would have. So the warblers that I've been talking about, of which there are quite a few species, they migrate at about 5,000 feet. But quite a lot of the warblers, they migrate at night, and so they're orientating themselves by the night sky, and would see the lights below and realise there was land there. They'd cross the channel, and would start to decide whether they're going to just be the first landing on a headland, or they're going to fly right over the top of us. And with all this beautiful weather we've been having, I don't doubt, and I do know that there's still a lot of warbler species that have arrived on their territories, even as far as Scotland. So sunbirds have just gone straight over the top of our heads. Some of the wading birds, they're migrating at just another level higher, about 16,500 feet. And these are birds that make huge migrations, and they might stop to feed. They'll see the UK as just a larder, so they can drop in, they can increase their fat supplies, they can rest their aching muscles, they'll feed along either our coastline or our estuaries or our mudflats, and then they'll head off again. These are birds that are possibly breeding in Iceland or Greenland or Scandinavia, but they really do need to have a sort of quite a peaceful place where they can stop and eat and refuel. And somewhere like South Hewish Marsh, near Thurlestone there, absolutely brilliant place to see these migrant birds eagerly feeding before they head off and leave our shores again. But some of the larger birds are flying at this sort of height. That's 25,000 foot. And whether that be birds of prey or, let's say, for example, I don't know, the geese that migrate over our shores fly at this sort of height. And that's the sort of view that they'll get of the area of outstanding natural beauty. And Slapton there at Torcross, you can see what an amazing feature it is from that sort of height, and that might be one of the reasons it draws so many birds in. So the swifts, absolutely wonderful birds. Their migration is very I nearly say it's very swift in the spring. They just seem to arrive en masse. They haven't got here yet. I usually see swifts the first week of May. I really look forward to them coming back, actually. They're just incredible birds. And it's a sign that, summer really is here. So, the old saying, just one swallow doesn't make a summer. Well, a handful of swifts really does make a summer. And these birds could have been on the wing for a couple of years. They've got very short legs and they don't land on the ground. And they'll fly huge distances, and they sort of leave very quietly. I love seeing the swifts when they first arrive, and I hear them screaming around our streets, and then they just seem to disappear in August. Of a very short amount of time in the country, but the sound of a screaming swift, just something else. Let me just see whether I can play some. So I'm sure you've all heard these noises as they wheel around and scream through our streets. Essentially, they were cave nesting birds before human beings came here and built houses and barns. They're having a tough time now, the swifts. We're too good at keeping our houses warm and not allowing any places for these birds to find nest sites. Although I am glad to say that some building companies are starting to make swift bricks, so that when they arrive, there's a place for them to live in some of our new housing. So that's the common swift. But this photo is one of Richard Moore's. He took it about 3 weeks ago. It's an alpine swift, and the alpine swift, it's a bird that essentially lives in the Alps. What a surprise. And it's been blown off course. And like many unusual Southern European birds that we see very occasionally on our shores, they're known as overshoots. So with all that glorious migrating weather, a couple of alpine swifts a year seem to just go a bit too far, and they miss the Alps. They just hit our shores, and they fly around for a few hours, about twice the size of a common swift, and then they're off again. They'll go back, they'll reorientate themselves, and they'll go back over the channel, and they'll find other alpine swifts and hopefully be able to survive and have a good summer down there. But these overshoots have been quite remarkable this year. Just at Slapton alone, there's been a night heron, which is a Southern European small heron, and a purple heron, a very long-necked bird, quite similar to our grey heron. And lots of avid bird watchers and twitchers have been about. Now lockdown's not quite as it was. People have been getting out and about and seeing these unusual birds. But these are the martins as well, shouldn't be forgotten, like the sand martins. They've arrived in big numbers. And on the Exe estuary, just last week, there was a roost in the reed bed there of 5,000 sand martins, incredible birds. And they'd all just gathered there because they must have had some advance news, because they knew it was colder up north. So they'd stayed with us down here. Lots and lots of sand martins at the moment over the lake at Slapton. Great little birds. We haven't got very many breeding colonies at all. They nest in sandy banks, and they dig quite long nesting holes into the sandbanks there. This is a bird that we all know, the house martins. I always see them as very well-dressed gentlemen with their blue-black suits. They look really smart and tidy little birds. And once again, some people aren't welcoming the house martins to their eaves. I'd love them at my house. But there we go. House martins, another bird that is, to a certain extent, is not doing particularly well at the moment, and it's some possibility that its migration isn't helping in the places that it goes. And there's the swift again, the common swift, much longer in the wing, quite a distinctive shape. But all of these birds attract predators. So this is a hobby. It's a bird of prey that is very, very agile, long side-like wings, and that follows the swallows, house martins, sand martins and swifts to prey upon them. So they should be arriving fairly soon. Out at sea, we've got some incredible birds. So the sea swallows, as I call them, the Arctic tern, it sees more daylight than any other animal in the world. Its annual round trip, wait for it, is 72,000 kilometers a year. And so in a lifetime, they can fly to, essentially the distances, flying to the moon and back a few times. Incredible birds. They don't stay and breed with us, but there has been a few seen offshore just in the last few days. Here's another really incredible bird, the Bartel Godwits. And the Bartel Godwit, there was one at South Hewish Marsh just the other day, actually, stopping off to feed up. But this is the bird that has has the prize, the champion for non-stop flying. And because of ringing and the use of micro technology nowadays, we've seen that a Bartel Godwit can fly 7,000 miles without stopping. It's an incredible feat for a bird, isn't it? And so the Bartel Godwits that are arriving from, could be essentially from Asia, will fly 7,000 miles without stopping, stop off at South Hewish Marsh, eat as much as it possibly can before it heads right off up to Alaska to breed there. Really one of the great bird migrating champions. Here's another champion. It's the Manx shearwater. There's been a couple of Manxes seen just off some of our headlands this last few days. We see a lot more of them in the autumn, to be honest, but 75% of the world population of this bird breeds in the UK. It migrates to South America and back, and they can live 35 years, and they fly 20,000 kilometers a year. So, you do the maths. There's one individual that we know has flown 8 million kilometers, which is the same as flying to the moon and back 10 times. Birds are just incredible animals. This is a bit of a favorite of mine as well. This is the Whimbrel. And like so many of these wading birds that are flying at quite a height, you don't necessarily see them, but you do sometimes hear them. And the Whimbrel has a 7-note whistle. It goes. I'm not very good at whistling, but the Whimbrel is. And those 7-note whistles are being heard more and more because birdwatchers are taking up something called knock-mig, which is nocturnal migration. And they put out little tape recorders, leave them running all night long, plug them into a computer in the morning, and it picks up those small sounds that are being made in the quietness of the night. And we're finding so much more about birds through knock-mig and the sort of strange movements of birds that you wouldn't expect to be migrating over us throughout the night. So that's the Whimbrel, the 7-note whistle. Well, this is a bird that if you can't identify it by sight, you would definitely identify it by its call. It's the common cuckoo. But really sadly, we've lost half of our cuckoos in the UK. 50% of the whole population of cuckoos in the UK have disappeared over the last 20 years alone. And we've been satellite tracking them to find out why we've been losing them. And it looks like it's the different routes that they take to fly to Africa and the different pressures that they face whilst on migration that is having this toll. So there's something called the Intertropical Convergence zone, which is the sort of timing that there are these huge weather frontal systems and drought-busting rains in that central part of Africa that really make a difference. And these birds winter in the Congo and they head back to the UK via West Africa. And they sometimes really get hit very, very hard by these weather conditions. It's a bird that I'm sure you know. It's a parasite, really. It'll lay its eggs in reed warbler nests or hedge sparrow nests or meadow pipit nests, and let those adult birds raise them before they head off back to Africa again. Fascinating bird, and I'm expecting to hear cuckoos in the next couple of weeks. Actually, I very rarely hear a cuckoo in April. It's usually the first week of May that I go to the spots where I know I'm going to hear them. Some have been seen and heard already. I've just not been in the right place. So I think I said earlier that one of the main reasons for birds migrating is to come and breed. But there's all the resident birds that we have as well, that in the springtime they're increasing their populations. And so by July, August, I'll be doing my summer bird talk. There are more birds here than ever because of all these youngsters, and you know, this young moorhen here, quite a character really. All young birds are great fun, but it does make it difficult identifying sometimes. So I'll say a bit more about that later. So the skylark. People think about the song of the skylark, but essentially, would you identify this bird? It's an LBJ. It's a little brown job, and they're essentially ground nesting birds, but they really do spend a huge amount of time up in the air, dancing and etching out their territories with this incredible song. So let's just I don't know, I love skylarks. It's a really special bird in the South Devon AONB with all that agricultural land. And they do seem to be doing really quite well. So here's a skylark. So these birds can sing pretty well all day long, from dawn all the way through to dusk, defending their territories. It's really a song of the spring. In the winter time, these birds gather together in huge flocks. We've seen in recent years over 1,000 down at East Saw. But by now they've long split up in these wintering flocks. They've paired up, and they're marking out their territories. A really distinctive song in the AONB. It's not the best of photographs, but this is a male linnet. It's a bird we see a lot of, mainly because we got so much gorse. That's a really unusual picture of a linnet, actually, because the gorse isn't in flower. But as you know, it's in flower at the moment, and you know, the smell of coconut is in the air, and the gorse is doing really, really well. But once again, it's a resident bird, just like our own garden birds that haven't gone very far. The wren, I think there are about 6 million wrens in the UK. Hopefully you've got them in your garden. It's a little bird with a big song. It really has a very, very loud, bursting song. And wrens are a real big part of the dawn chorus when they get into full song. Great little birds. This is a real a character of the spring. This is the wheatear. It's a bird that breeds up on Dartmoor and Exmoor. But they do tend to linger a little bit just on the coastline, just when they make sure that there are no late snows coming through. And the male wheatear, they've been seen quite recently down at Start Point and other headlands like Berry Head. These are the sort of place they're the first landing ports where they'll stop and feed up before they go up and get on territory. Just while I'm talking about some of those places, this has been a real treat. This is a chough, the emblem for Cornwall. It's a rare bird in Devon. It's even rarer in South Devon. And there's been one individual hanging around Bolt Head and Bolt Tail, just round the corner from Hope Cove and Salcombe there. And I'd like to think that one day in the future, the choughs will stay and breed in some of our sea caves. They've got a very distinctive nasal noise. They say chow, chow. And yeah, it's definitely something I'll be listening out for. A little bit similar to a jackdaw, but those really obvious fingered primaries there is something to look forward to. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a bird that might be might share the AONB with us in the future. So this could be a bit confusing for folk. The warblers, there's a whole range of warblers that come and spend the summer with us. Perhaps the commonest is the Willow Warbler. It's got a descending song. They're great birds, really quite common, and they're going to be all over our woodland scrub and quite a range of habitats across the AONB. This is much more of a woodland species, the black cap. Some of those are starting not to even bother to migrate, or there could just be Eastern European birds that instead of going to Africa, they come here. But they're a really good songster, a very, very fluty song. I used to call them Northern Nightingales. A really quite a beautiful song is the black cap. There's a whitethroat. Whitethroats have just started to arrive. They've got a very, very scratchy, disorganized song, but they have what's called a song flight. Quite a lot of the warblers, they will advertise themselves with their songs, but make a single flight into the air, singing as they go, and then they'll parachute down to cover. And once again, they sing just basically to tell other males to keep away, that this is where they want to they've either found a female or they want to attract a female, and they want to defend that territory for themselves to raise a family. There's one of those scratchy birds. This is the sedge warbler. Essentially, it lives in reed beds. They can almost double their weight before they go on a migration. So we find them in August, September, just constantly feeding and getting themselves strong enough to do the migration. And the birds that are just arriving now are arriving very, very thin indeed, and they're really busy getting up their body weight and starting to build nests in reed beds. I really like sedge warblers. They're a bit of a mimic as well. They'll bring some bird songs from Africa back here in their garbled song. This is the reed warbler. Once again, another quite a scratchy, throaty sort of a song that they give from deep inside the reeds. We get lots of reed warblers here, and I think I mentioned earlier that they are parasitized by cuckoos. Nice to actually see reed warbler colonies. But this is an incredible bird. This is the Marsh Warbler. It's a very, very rare bird, but their whole song is based on mimicry. Some Marsh Warblers have been known to have a vocabulary with over 200 African bird songs that they mix together. They're the essential, I suppose, modelling equivalent of of one of these sort of music mixers that will just put all sorts of sounds together, and they will sing, like, can you believe it, 200 African bird songs that they bring back here to use to attract a mate. And the Marsh Warbler with the most repertoire is the bird that usually gets the female. This is a real favourite of mine, the Chetty's Warbler, a very, very explosive song. And have you noticed that all of these birds are really little brown birds? But they've got incredibly different songs and very, very attractive songs. And that's how they can be unobtrusive, they can hide away from predators, but at the still time be able to meet others of their own species to breed. So that's the Chetty's Warbler. The stone chats that we're starting to see on our coastline are going to be changing soon. There's the male stone chat, a very, very distinctive bird with that black, white and bright orange chest in the gorse. But very soon their first set of youngsters are going to fledge, and then we're going to have quite different birds altogether, and that's one of the challenges for late spring. As the youngsters start to come out and we can see them, they're in really different sorts of plumages, and as they transgress from from very young birds to adult birds ready for another migration, it can be quite confusing for people that want to put the names to birds. A lot of people ask me that they're desperate to put names to birds, but sometimes just enjoying them for what they are is enough. So the birds that we see at home in our gardens, like the blue tit, these resident birds are still here in the springtime, and very soon, once those eggs have been laid and start to hatch, they're going to have a really busy time on their hands. A blue tit having to feed a clutch of up to 12 youngsters, it must be a very tiring job for them. But that's why the UK is so rich in birds, because of the sheer amount of caterpillars and grubs that are available to them in our rich countryside. So here's another resident. It's the really special soil bunting. So here in South Devon, in 1990, there were only 120 birds, 120 pairs, sorry, and that was for the whole of the UK. But now there's over 1,000 pairs working with farmers and landowners. The RSPB and ourselves have worked hard to get the soil buntings up again. But their migration doesn't seem to affect the soil buntings. They don't seem to move more than a few kilometres from where they were born. And the spring is, they sing a little bit like the yellowhammers, but it's they're real characterful birds. When I first came down this way, it was definitely the bird that I was desperate to see. I actually hear them and see them almost every time I go out in the AONB now. A real welcome sight indeed. So as the season progresses, I suppose one of the last summer migrants to come to see us is the spotted flycatcher. The spotted flycatchers don't usually arrive here until June, and they're usually the first off at the end of July or early August. So some of these summer visitors don't stay long at all, and sadly the spotted flycatcher numbers are continuing to be very low. So we'll be keeping an eye out on their populations and see what we can do about trying to conserve them. So yeah, I just got a couple more soil buntings there. These are the real stay-at-home birds that don't move far from their nests. There's a nice bright male and a female there. Really quite characteristic birds of the AONB. So I've talked a little bit about all this incredible weather that we've been having, and a lot of birds have been up in the sky, and so I've got a little montage here of birds of prey. So top left we have the common buzzard. It's the most widespread bird of prey in the UK. Quite distinctive, with large broad wings and a short neck and tail, and they're often gliding and soaring on shallow V-shaped wings. They can be quite variable in colour as well. Some of the buzzards you might see are very pale, and some can be quite dark. And those of you that have picked up on that almost cat-like mewing call, that's the buzzard constantly chattering and calling to each other. Off to its right is the kestrel, one of the only birds of prey that you're really going to see hovering. They keep their head perfectly still where they hover in the sky, gradually getting lower before they dive down on some unassuming mouse or even some large insects. That's the Kestrel Forest. Top right, not quite a bird of prey. It's the largest corvid. It's the raven, and the croaking ravens do very well in the South Hams and at Berry Head. So we enjoy seeing the ravens in the sky. Below it, we've got a red kite, that very distinctive forked tail. In a couple of weeks' time, we should see a migration of red kites over our patch. Birds that are flying essentially from west to east. They've come from southern Europe, and they'll be heading over to Scandinavia. Below the red kite, flying left, is the Sparrowhawk. It's a bird that's dashing around, catching a lot of small birds to feed its own chicks. And we've got a good strong population of sparrowhawks with us. To the left of that, with the pale belly, is the osprey. And every year we see numbers of ospreys that are either migrating over us, or they'll stop for a couple of days and feed on our estuaries before moving off. It's always a special sight. And there's been a couple seen already this year. And to the left of that is the Peregrine Falcon, a really thick-set, broad-chested, rapier-like bird, the fastest flying bird in the UK, possibly in the world, actually, apart from some of the large swifts in Asia. But that's the Peregrine Falcon, an incredible bird to have around. And this just makes me, with all these blue skies, it makes me think of the spring, because birds are migrating and they're either going over the top of us, or they're just, it seems like they're just enjoying the weather. But as we know, they're actually just out there feeding on insects or surveying the land below them. So there's lots of places you can get information. Of the 150 species across our patch, I've not really said very much about many of them, I've not even mentioned half of them. There's lots of places you can find out about birds on the web. Do try Devon Birds. It's a great website. It's a conservation organisation that you can find out what was seen yesterday or today, all sorts of information there. I think just talking to people with binoculars is a good idea. They're usually quite friendly folk, and we'll stop and say hello. So, just stop and ask people with binoculars to see what they've seen. And of course, our website as well. We've got some fabulous walks on our website. We really have. And you can watch some videos, and you can get some audio guides, and you get a real impression of where to go birding. It's really worth having a look. Just a couple of snaps from our website there. So we've got the this is a walk at West Alvin Woods. Woods are brilliant places in the springtime, and this is where you're going to catch your dawn chorus, because there's lots of different birds all competing with each other, and that sort of the orchestra of birds in a woodland really has to be heard to be believed. Definitely worth getting up for. And International Dawn Chorus Day is coming up. The RSPB have a lot of information about that, and you could get involved yourself and hear dawn choruses from around the world, or just hear what's outside your window. I did mention our website once again. It was so difficult for me to tell you where to go. It's great birding all over the area there, but our particular walks are the ones on the coastline, or the ones on our estuaries, or in the woodlands. It's all there, really. So rather than me actually picking out a particular place, I would like to say, really, you've just got to get out there. It is the only way to do it. And because we're not actually running many physical events where I can be in the field with you and point the birds out, or give you some direction of who's singing where, you're going to have to do it remotely, or just do it within your bubble. So hopefully we'll get back to normal one day in the future, and we'll be able to get out in the field together. That would be brilliant. So in terms of me just wrapping things up at the moment, we've got another talk in July, the Summer Guide to Bird Watching. That's going to be giving you a bit of an update on breeding birds and their successes. Talk a lot more about nests and the journeys that these birds are going to have to start thinking about taking. So I'll very much look forward to speaking to you all in July. But otherwise, Nikki, I'll finish sharing my